Hello, podcast listeners. This is your host with the most. Listen, guys, we're going to start off by talking about bosses, what it's like to be a boss, what it's like to have a boss. We're going to get into managerial styles. Plus, we've got a comment on the upcoming Flash movie. No spoilers included whatsoever. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of JJ Meets World. And by the way, if you'd like to help support our podcast, visit jjmeetsworld.com where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some killer swag at our merch shop, or click the link to Apple Podcast and give us a 5-star review.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirled as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called J.J. Meets World.
Tucker, recently I realized that there's a weird kind of life to things that I felt like I really wanted to have, or that I needed to make my life more convenient when it comes to technology. And I cleaned out my office not so long ago, and I found like 4 iPods. I've got an entire drawer full of hard drives from different eras using different USB ports. I've got a set of speakers, computer speakers, that I just absolutely had to have to refine my computer experience. They had a little dial you could turn the volume up and down on that sat next to your mouse.
Ooh,
That
a volume dial.
I know, right? See, and that's the thing, is it's not that I need to necessarily have the volume accessible easier, because I've always just used a little like switch on the speakers, but this felt like I was really fancy, right? Fancy dancy.
Super.
So I have all these things and I realized, gosh, I didn't need them. I didn't make the most out of that particular type of technology when it was available to me. And I think that a lot of times we adapt and adopt things when it comes to technology and find out that, this is not really what I expected it to be, with the exception of here's some times in my life where my mind has been blown and I totally got into it. My iPod Touch, the precursor to the iPhone. Holy moly, was that thing amazing to me. And I still use it to this day.
And is it like the really, really tiny form factor where it feels like it's almost made of paper at this point?
Yeah.
There's not much to it. Yeah. I remember. I mean, I'm thinking, you're making me think of my first smartphone, which was a BlackBerry Storm. And just thinking about how I was like, well, I'm in the future now because I've got a BlackBerry Storm. But that was when you couldn't get an iPhone in Fargo yet.
And, isn't it amazing to think of, like, there was a time when you couldn't get access to something just because of your geographical location?
I know.
But we didn't have an Apple store. So, we were not high on the priority list. And we are also probably not heavy T-Mobile or AT&T users out here.
Yeah, it was the network thing. It wasn't available on Verizon at that moment, I believe. And so like you like the Verizon network was like the only really active network that I recall up here. But you needed AT&T, I believe, at that time. And we just didn't have a network up here in Fargo. So they would do, Apple will often, or used to at least, would do like the really big markets, like the big cities, which makes sense. And then it would get rolled out later. But God, I feel like, I'm probably misremembering this, but I feel like it was a solid 2 to 3 years after the launch of the iPhone before we even got it in Fargo.
Oh, I think you are probably dead on. And you actually, that might be a very conservative estimate if you really think about it. I think that, to me, North Dakota was the last to get a bunch of stuff. So for example, something gets big in New York City and 2 years later it arrives in Fargo, right? So like the cronut becomes massive and everyone's like, it's a croissant, it's a donut, everyone loves it. That doesn't actually make its way to us for years, if it even actually gets here.
I've never heard of that before.
Oh, you've never
what?
heard of the cronut? The cronut was huge,
No.
massive.
No, but I do remember like when Krispy Kreme came here.
Yeah,
Do we still have Krispy Kreme storefronts anymore?
we don't.
I
We
didn't
do
think
not.
so. You pretty much get them at gas stations now.
Right. You can order them. I'm surprised that Sandy's Donuts has a local stranglehold on the donut industry, but I'm surprised we don't have a Dunkin' Donuts.
I'm really happy though that Sandy's has that. Like, I like the fact that, whenever you go to a city or a town, you want to try something that's only there. And sure, donuts are pretty similar wherever you go, but it is nice to be like, yeah, we've got great donuts here in Fargo and West Fargo that you really can't get anywhere else. Like, they got Cookie Monster donuts. Although I will say it's been a while since I've gone to Sandy's.
Usually I got to admit they're not officially licensed though, so I don't know how I feel about them.
It's like a rundown gas station painting Homer Simpson on their wall or something.
Bingo.
But oftentimes when I go to Sandy's, I'll if I'm feeling donuts, I almost always want a chocolate long john filled with custard. That's my jam. However, I would walk into Sandy's thinking that's what I'm going to get. And then I'd be like, but you know what I really want? I really want a peanut butter fried cinnamon roll. And that's what I would end up getting.
Do you know what my favorite donut is?
I don't.
Not a donut. I am just not a donut guy.
Oh, I forgot that weird fucking fact about you.
Yep.
Are you also not a cake guy, or was that just donuts?
Oh, no. I love cake. But a cake donut is not cake.
Is a donut is it the form factor you don't like? Because it's things that you like. You like dough. You like sugar.
I do. So you're asking me, like, is it because like the shape, or is it?
Yeah.
So
is it something? I'm assuming it's something where it looks too much like a butthole for you to want to eat it.
No, because I love other butthole shaped things. I eat Cheerios almost every morning.
You eat Cheerios?
Yeah, so I'm not against it. Here's what I think it is about donuts. In the morning, I want something savory. I want something salty to start my day. I don't want something overly sweet. And I think that's the problem, is that donuts are so sweet.
But donuts are not morning only.
They used to be. That's where they were born, right? It's like saying like pancakes aren't morning only. And I agree. But like if you're eating a donut at 2:00 in the afternoon,
you're living the life. You figured out true happiness.
It's not fresh. It's left over from the morning.
Yeah, but it's sugar, and so it's still in really good condition. Like,
yeah,
you could wait until 9 that night.
I'll have a candy bar. It's not deep fried, and it's in its own individual wrapper. I think the thing about donuts is that, like, first of all, they're overrated. They're overhyped. Right? Everyone's like, oh, this is the best donut I've ever had in the world. Donuts are this. And I'm like, no, when you really think about it, donuts are not the best thing in the world. You like it because it's there in front of you. It's like saying, this is the best roller coaster I've ever been on. No, it's just it's the nearest roller coaster.
Now, you're not a coffee drinker, right?
I am not. And I think that's the other big problem.
Because my grandmother, Grandma Mac, my mom's mom, she used to make like homemade fried donuts, but they'd just be cake donuts. They wouldn't have any frosting on them or anything. They have maybe a little bit of sugar in the batter, but not much. And but they were the perfect coffee companion. They dunk in coffee so well. And so, like, for me, either side of the donut spectrum, either one that's filled with custard and slathered with frosting, or one that's really just the cake batter and almost a little bland compared to it, but paired with coffee. The only other thing I would add, though, is that I'm all about sugary pastries and then chasing that down with ice cold 2% milk. And I'm talking chugging it. Like, one of my favorite things to do is go to Hornbacher's, get one of their sugar cookies with like an inch of frosting on top, and get a little single serving of 2%. And then I put the cookie on the shelf for an hour so it can kind of warm up a bit. And I put the milk in the fridge so it stays nice and cool. Then I mow down that cookie and then I chug that milk. Dude, that gets me higher than any drug.
You certainly are, like, deep into this. Look at you.
I know how to live life correctly, JJ.
Okay, yeah. Okay. I'm glad. I'm
experience.
good. I'm glad for you. To me, when I want to fantasize about my perfect breakfast pastry, because here's the thing, I love other breakfast pastries besides donuts. So, for example, biscotti. Love some biscotti.
Mm.
Pillsbury's orange Danish rolls are, in my opinion, the best breakfast food of all time. I could eat an entire can of that stuff in one sitting by myself and not feel guilty at all. And in fact, I'll probably like be humming like when I'm picking my next one, like and they're just, that's what my jam is. It's what I prefer. It's what I like the most. And so to me, I just think that there are other things that for my personal taste are better than donuts. That being said, I love showing up with donuts. I love going someplace and being like, who wants donuts? And then watching people's eyes glaze over with excitement, like some kind of weird part of their lizard brain has taken over. And they're just like, must have sugar and dough, must fight for bacon topped Long John.
Donuts are the things that corporations use to make their employees feel for about 5 minutes that they're not trapped in an endless hellscape of work.
It's true.
I've done so many like videoed interviews at corporate offices, you know, banks and other places like that. And there's a telltale sign that employees will say that lets you know, oh, this place sucks to work at. You'll ask them like, hey, so what's one of like the best things about this job? And they'll say, and I swear to God, JJ, they'll even use these words. Well, on Fridays, we have donuts. And I just go crazy for those donuts. And it's like, okay, if the donuts are the highlight, that means this job sucks because you get donuts any time. And if you're like, oh, thank God this job has donuts, otherwise I don't know if I'd want to work here. I'm more interested in, hey, how much do you pay? What are the benefits? You know, do I have to do things that are against my ethics? Not, do you have donuts on Fridays?
Sure. I think that to me, I ran the numbers at one point and I was like, okay, so take like company A that you're talking about, right? Brings donuts in every Friday and they're going to spend, let's say $25 on donuts.
Are you tired boy this morning?
Was that?
Are you a tired boy this morning? I'm hearing some yawn pauses.
No, I'm covering the mic while I'm sneezing for whatever reason. I can't stop sneezing this morning.
JJ and I cannot see each other. If anyone's wondering why I'm saying that,
we're both wearing blindfolds in front of each other. So that's in Tucker is in a soundproof room. Okay, so let's say they spend $25 on donuts every single Friday, right? So in a given year, they're spending 52 times 25. I think they'd be better off putting in a pop machine because the cost of soda, when you consider like the syrup in the bag and everything, even the electricity to run the machine, is incredibly reasonable. I mean, like it's next to nothing. And that is something I think your employees would prefer more. And you might say like, well, God, not everyone drinks pop. And you're like, you're correct. But you know what? They could also use the spigot that just has carbonated water and they could have a fun fizzy drink. They could put Crystal Light in there. They could mix it with coffee. I don't know if carbonated coffee is a thing yet, but it could be.
Yeah, I'll pass on carbonated coffee.
I feel like there's more appeal to that than there is to we've got a box of donuts.
Well, especially if it's all day long, it's self-serve, you probably have a brand in there that you like. I think though, I mean, they wouldn't do a free one though, right? But I think they could do a discount.
Be free.
Oh, it would be free. That'd be nice. Because I was going to say if it's not free, then just make it like 50 cents. So it's like at cost, right?
The only thing that you wouldn't be able to have in this soda machine is cups. Like you wouldn't want to provide an endless stream of cups.
Oh, so it's like a soda fountain.
Yeah. It's a soda machine.
Yeah, totally.
It is. Yeah, it's not like it's not a vending machine. This is like a 6 flavor pop fountain machine.
God, though, when we worked at the Fargo Theater, though, and having access to that soda, I gained so much weight. So it's like, oh, how many large Pepsis can I put away in a 4-hour shift? Well, a lot. I could put in maybe 8.
Yeah, and you grab one to go on your way home. That's the thing is, I think to me, like that's cool. That's a reward for people as they enjoy toiling away and trying to figure out ways that they can work less and get paid more. I think that's kind of the corporate mentality right now is what can I do to keep this job, but also not attract additional work that might come my way. Does that make sense?
I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, if the base concept is I'm getting paid to do a specific task and then they want to put more things on top of that after we've made that agreement, well, now they're just getting more value that we didn't agree on for the same amount of money. But I guess it depends on what the work is. Like I've worked at a place before, and this didn't happen to me, but I saw it happen to a coworker where the boss, like they hired that guy to be a graphic designer. And then he ended up doing all sorts of other shit that he didn't like. He's like, that's not what I'm here for. I'm not here to take your laundry to the laundromat. I'm not here to stuff these envelopes. And the bosses would be like, yeah, well, we want to get our value out of you. And he's like, yeah, well, you're paying me to do graphic design and I'm doing no graphic design.
I think a lot of times when a boss is trying to use that as an example of like, I need to get my money's worth out of you. The problem is that they are not prepared enough to have an appropriate number of assignments, an appropriate amount of workload to put on that person. Yeah. And so they feel that they have, in a way they're jealous, right? Because that person has had opportunity to spend an hour chatting with their coworkers about this, that, and the other thing.
Right.
I've dealt with that in my own space, and it's ironic because it's sort of like, well, I want you to come up with your own path, but some people just are not meant to do that in the workforce, right? Like some people just this is my list in front of me and on a Post-it, and I knock them off, and once I'm done, I'm done. Mm-hmm. And I can't fault those people one bit, because clearly if you can get that done in 2 hours, first of all, I hired the right person because they are efficient at what they do. But I also need to think to myself, okay, what can I be doing to give you more opportunity or inspire you to try and find something that is passionate to you? Because that's the beauty of it, is if you have someone who's accomplishing their whole workload, now they can open up for, what about this job makes you feel good and excited? Because now we can focus on that now that the work is done.
Now that you're a brand manager at KFGO,
you better believe your butt.
And so you've got people underneath you, right?
I do.
So what is that?
Literally,
like?
I make them hold my desk up.
I mean, I'm guessing these are the kind of conversations you have to have with them.
Yeah. And people have the conversations with me too. I will say this. This is going to sound very, what's the best way to put this? This is going to sound very like HR corporate culture of me. Be like, I like to listen. That's important to me, is to listen to people and have them tell me what they like and think. And so, yeah, as a manager, and I've had to be a manager before, where I've had to get down on and essentially be like, take someone to task. You did not follow through on what we had discussed. You need to do better. And the thing that I like the most about being able to affect change is I like to insulate people from having to deal with the things that are frustrating. And so in a way, it's like, I want to take that burden on me rather than having it put on somebody else, so that they can concentrate on the things that they like so much. And what sucks is sometimes it backfires, because clearly what that person needs is a good, swift, kick to the ego, or something that goes along the line of saying like, hey, listen, man, this is not just us. It is the whole company, and you got to do a better job representing like the whole company. Mm-hmm. And that happened a lot when I was at WeFest, because at WeFest, what I would do is I would empower people who, weren't managers most of the year to be a manager for a 7-day period, mm-hmm. and get them to be excited and take ownership. And I noticed the most common thing that would happen with those managers is if they had an issue where it required them being stern, letting an employee go because they showed up drunk, somebody who didn't show up until 2 hours after their shift and then wanted to leave early, someone who showed up with the wrong kind of shoes, so you had to have them go back to their campsite. All of these things, they would call me over and go like, well, what do you think I should do? And that's where I'm like, listen, this is not what I'm supposed to do for you. Like, you're supposed to call me when you tell me like, oh my God, someone's foot got run over with a tractor and I don't know what to do now. This is just managing people. And what I need you to do is I need you to manage these people. If they showed up drunk, what do you want to do? Do you want to lose that employee for the day and give them a second chance tomorrow? That's your choice. Do you want to fire them because you need to set an example for the 7 other people that they signed up to work with who showed up and you thought maybe they had been partying too hard? I will back your decision, but I don't want to make the decision for you. Right. I want people to, otherwise, what's the point? I'll just call you an assistant manager and, I'll just show up and make all the decisions for you. And that's not what I want. I want them to have ownership over the space they're at. For the same thing happened even in line benders when we would be doing, if I wasn't going out on a show, I'd pick someone to be sort of the person in charge, and their job as the person in charge would be to go and meet the client and say, hi, I'm so-and-so. We'll be here. We're ready for a 7:30 show. Anything I need to know? Okay, great. And then collect a check at the end and possibly drive if it's out of town. And it used to be that I would call them on, like, if they were driving 20 minutes away for a show, I'd call and make sure that everyone got there on time. Mm-hmm. And I would call after the show and ask how it went. But it got to the point of where I'm like, I trust these people and they know what they're supposed to do and they know how to do it, that I'll talk to them if they have an issue and they need to call me and ask. And those are absolute moments where I will be there. Like, gosh, we showed up at the venue. They said it's, like, we have a 7:30 show, but they said it's probably not going to be until 10 o'clock. What do you want us to do? Mm-hmm. And that's where I'll be like, hey, walk. I'll get in on that type of a situation just to essentially like empower them to make that call. Or ask them, do you guys want to hang around for it? Do you, what do you want to do? And just be there to back that decision. But my God, there are some times where I just get absolutely frustrated with someone who wants a job but doesn't want to do the job, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that was a long tirade.
It's partly a maturation thing. I have been in my career every kind of employee. I've been a terrible employee. I've been a stellar employee. I've been a middle of the road employee. So I've been all of those things. And each one is a bit different. And I can think back on the ones where I was a bad employee. And I can just kind of go, what was going on there? And it still was on me to be a good employee, but I was also just not reacting well to the culture of the place I was at. You get demoralized, and it's still no excuse to be a bad employee. You should still put your best foot forward every single day. And so it's also then made me think of, like, right now I'm on the hunt for a job. And so I'm looking at places. I've been getting some nice freelance work coming through. So I'm not like in a huge rush to get one, but I really want to try to find a job, not one where I'm like, oh, will I be satisfied with the thing that I'm doing necessarily? Or like, oh, is it, it doesn't have to necessarily be video production, but I'd like to find a place with like a vibe that just is like, yeah, the people don't seem to hate it here. Right? Like, at a minimum, getting up in the morning and going to that place won't crush my soul. And that's kind of the thing that makes it like, so, my skill set is video production. But if I find a job doing, I don't know, bricklaying or something, but everyone is really cool, good pay and benefits, it's not a toxic work environment, then it's like, shit, that's like most of the battle right there,
Do you think that there's a world where you will ever just walk into a job that you've been at for, let's say, a year and feel unfulfilled and just say, I'm done, and leave?
I'm trying to think. Have I done that before? I mean, it wasn't the times I've quit a job wasn't necessarily because of being unfulfilled necessarily. I don't know. I can absolutely see that, but it just depends on everything else, right? Like leaving a job is not just about whether I like it or not. It's about what is my financial situation. Right now, I have very little debt and I don't have any dependents. I don't have any kids. I don't have a spouse. And so it's easy for me. Like if I was in a job right now that I thought this job sucks, it'd be easier for me to leave it than it would be if I had a bunch of if I had more responsibilities on my plate than I do right now. So I've never lived underneath that pressure before, I guess.
I can't ever see a world. I mean, the only time that I've ever like quit a job in a fit of passion was it 2 years ago now? It was a month before WeFest, and I had already done 3 months of legwork into it, like finding managers and arranging contracts and all of this stuff. And the way WeFest worked was I started there when the original ownership owned it, and I loved it, and it was great because it was all local people. It was a lot of fun. The only downside was is people had been there for so long, they started like taking advantage of the system a little bit.
Sure.
And there's a lot of like, well, this is the way we've always done it. There's a lot of, well, I've always gotten away with this, so I might as well continue to get away with it, which is
Right.
it's certainly not what I think is important when it comes to work. And then they sold it to another company. And that new company did the same thing most new companies did. They came in the first year and they're like, we just want to watch how this whole thing goes. God, we bought this company because it's super profitable and we're very excited about it. Well, of course, what they wanted to do is they just wanted to see like what they can cut, right? And what's amazing to me is when somebody buys a company, especially something like WeFest, you buy it because it's making money and it's great. And you think that you're going to be able to squeeze more money out of it by taking away things, by changing the way things operate. And then you get mad when things don't go that way. And rather than saying like, listen, let's bring back some of the old magic, they doubled down on like, nope, we'll bring in people from Colorado who do festivals everywhere. Like, yep, they do festivals where 1,000 people show up and 400 people camp. This is a festival where 80,000 people camp and 150,000 people show up. Don't pretend like you know what's going on when you've never been a part of a beast like this. And so this new company came in, ran it into the ground within 4 years, and then ended up selling it. In fact, like I think they bought WeFest for something like $20 million. And
wow.
And when they sold WeFest along with maybe like 10 other events that they did across the country for $4 million.
Okay.
I mean, they took a gigantic bath on this thing. So So I think to me, the thing that I saw there was like, okay, they came in and they thought they knew what was best and then they ruined it. And here's the thing that sucked. I left WeFest the first time because I didn't like the way the new company was doing this. I didn't like the way they treated employees. I didn't like the way they treated patrons. I didn't like the way they treated the environment. And so I said, hey, I am out next year. And they found somebody else. And then it was a huge mistake. I mean, I heard, and I'm saying that I'm perfect, but I'm saying whoever they picked to take over for me had no idea what they were doing and had a complete and total breakdown. And so then the year after that, they decide to sell, then there's the pandemic year, the first year of the pandemic. And so they decide to sell, and this new outfit buys it out. And one of the first things the new outfit did, because they're made up of local people, is they reached out to those who used to work there saying, hey, we'd like to put the secret sauce back on the Big Mac. And so, right. And they're like, we need to make this happen. So I was like, yeah, okay, I'll come back. And the only downside was there was a holdover of like 7 or 8, not full-time, but like contract employees from the previous regime that had been put in place by the company that messed everything up. And so I was stuck working with like a head of employment who didn't know what she was doing. And this drove me just nuts. So when you consider the number of people who are in those campgrounds, you need a number of people to service them. So let's consider these to be Applebee's. Okay. So let's say that the Lake Sally campground is an Applebee's that has seating for 5,000 people. Okay. I wanted 10 employees per shift, meaning that there are 1 employee per 500 patrons in that space. And it's mainly because of those 500 patrons, only 475 are fine the whole time. They set up their trailer. There's nothing that they need. They've been there before, et cetera, et cetera. But the 25 of those 500 need a lot of attention. Things like people who've never set something up before, people from out of the area. There's domestic disturbances. There's certainly attacks and there's violence that takes place. There is underage drinking. There's all these things that we help with. There's porta potties that get lit on fire. There's garbage that needs to be picked up. The list just goes on and on and on and on and on. So I ask for 10 people per shift so think about that. And they're the servers, they're the cooks, they are the hostesses, they are the car hops. They're doing everything inside of this campground like you would inside of an Applebee's. And so there are 3 shifts. So I'm asking for 30 people per campground to be hired. So, which is not unreasonable. It used to be that there were like 40 people per shift hired back in the day.
Okay.
So and I know this is going on for a long time, but just to set the foundation here. So I'm on a conference call with this girl, and I've had a bad back and forth with her because she was one of the reasons I left originally during the other ownership. And I said, this is how many people I need. And she's like, well, I'm not going to be able to hire that many. And I said, well, how many are you going to be able to hire? She's like, well, I've got 3 in this shift, 2 in this shift, and 3 in this shift. And I said, that's unacceptable. There's no way we can make that happen. And she's like, well, this is just the way it is. And I'm having trouble getting people. And so what's the minimum number? And I was like, the minimum number would be 5 people per shift. But at that point, we can't help out with garbage collection, recycling. Essentially the people there are just there to react to problems as they come. They can't be proactive in the things they need to do. And she's like, okay. So then she sends an email that I get CC'd on to the new owner that says, JJ had requested, 40 people per shift, and I denied that, and we're going to make it, more reasonable. And so she essentially threw me under the bus for what this was. And so the owner did a bonehead move, which is he emailed back like, good job, Aaron. We have to keep people in check.
But you saw that email.
Yeah, and I'm on that email. And so I emailed back and I was like, hey guys, clearly my skill set is not what you want going forward with this new thing. Essentially like the 2 other managers that the 2 other supervisors that I've got, will take excellent care of this, but I have no desire to be a part of this. So I send that out and I immediately get like 5 calls. I get a call from like the operations director. I get a call from the head of maintenance. I get a call from, this person, and they're all like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And I was like, listen, I refuse to clean up the mistakes that this woman is going to continue to make, because right now, whatever she's doing is she's blaming me for something that she did that's wrong. Right. Like,
right.
I don't know what it is, but like, for whatever reason, like she literally just told me this, and I literally told her, listen, 15 people for that Applebee's campground is what it'll take for me to get by. But she didn't fulfill what I had asked for, which is her sole job in employment is to hire the number of people. And what's amazing is when they used to employ a local person to be in charge of their hiring, they did a fantastic job because they knew, hey, listen, it'd be great for this campground. I'm going to call up the Boys and Girls Club, and I'm going to say like, hey, listen, how many people do you have working there who for every hour that they work, they're going to earn $10, but we're also going to donate $5 to their organization. right? And so the type of thing where it's good for you, good for them.
Yeah.
And so they knew that because they were local. They weren't some person who just flew in and thought they knew exactly what they needed to do and, blah, 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 like there. So I quit. And so then the owner calls me and says, listen, this was 100% my mistake. I've been brought up to speed on exactly what is happening, and I understand that Aaron was trying to pull the wool over my eyes, and I really hope that you can forgive me for that email, because clearly, you've been here a lot longer than anybody has on that conversation, and I want to make sure that we get you back here. That's important to me. And I said, and I feel good and bad about this, and I'm like, you made your bed, now you got to sleep in it. Because my mentality was, you chose this person and then you blindly listened to her and you ostracized me from it. And I understand you're apologizing for that now, but when we're in the midst of a festival with 150,000 people, I already know I can't trust your judgment.
Yeah. And it's also like, what's going to be different? Like, don't just tell me, hey, I'm sorry I messed up. Tell me, okay, so what is going to be different then? Because clearly what's happening now is not going to work out. And, I totally hear you.
So I said, like, listen, I'm not gonna show up. And actually, I just deleted a folder in my Gmail that had 850 emails in it. Email threads, mind you. So there's probably even more individual emails, but 850 threads that were from my WeFest days. And the very last one that got sent that I was included in was one that Phil Goodell had sent out. And it was like, as some of you may have heard, JJ's decided not to come back from WeFest this year, but he hopes that everyone has a really, really great festival. And if there's anything that you need, he's still available, still at the same phone number. And I was like, Phil, that's a classy move. And I had told him that, right? I was like, listen, I will help you guys with whatever you want, but I do not want to be a part of that organization anymore. It's just, and like, then everyone was telling me that on the second day of the festival, so before the music has even started, but people are camping, this girl who apparently had messed up everywhere. She had messed up hiring everywhere. I found out that she completely collapsed, like, under the pressure, and someone found her in a ticket booth, like laying in the fetal position, crying.
Oof.
And I feel bad for her because clearly she had no idea what she was doing. She bit off more than she can chew, whatever kind of other idioms you want to throw at there. But at the same time, I want to be like, but someone did trust her to do this and then didn't follow through as her manager, right? Like, somebody was above her in some way, shape, or form, and they let an employee flounder without checking in, without doing any due diligence. And that's what you end up. So, like, that's the thing, is like, it drives me nuts that happened. Right.
Yep. Absolutely.
So yeah, it was pretty damn crazy.
Well, okay. So then how do you let that situation inform you as a manager, right? Because that was your situation. I mean, you were a manager under other managers, right? And so how does that inform how you approach things with people who work underneath you? They're not your employees, but they do report to you, right? You are their manager. They are lower than you in the org chart. So like, do you think you've ever had a moment where you're like, oh shit, you know what? I'm going down a similar path to managers I've had in the past. I don't want to do that. I'm going to change course.
I absolutely have. And my change of course is that, like, unless something is on fire, I have a minute to take a breath. Right. And that, I think, is the important thing, is take a breath, think it out, because sometimes someone comes at you with a wild request, or like, oh, I need 7 vacation days off and it's going to be next week. Take a breath and then go, okay, what is really happening here? Is it something that we can do without putting too much stress on everyone else? And then I take that moment to figure out what the next step is going to be, rather than just shooting off an email that says, absolutely not, I told you 3 months ago to put your vacation in and you didn't. because I think for the most part, the team that I get to work with are people who want to be there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's forcing anybody to come and work at the radio station with me. No, and really, like, we're not hiring roles where people are, let's say, oh God, I just have to get a job for this, right?
Right.
And so to me, like, there's a reason behind it, right? And so what I would like to do in that situation is have a face-to-face with that employee and be like, hey, listen, 7 days, what's the deal going on? Because you're supposed to put these in 3 months ago. How can we work around this? Oh, well, I was not going to go to a family reunion and then I found out I have to. Or maybe there's something like with my, I'm getting divorced and it's going to be my time with the kids, blah, 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 blah. So I'd be like, I will figure, and then in that case, we'll figure out what it is, because balancing your work life and your personal life is incredibly important. And I think that's important. And so that's one thing I learned from this, is not to just, and also like to not just blindly believe everything that you read. I mean, we've learned that with our news. We've learned that with the things that we've learned it with a Marvel movie, secrets. You can't believe everything that you read. And so that was another moment for me where I was like, okay, so I need to get some kind of verification on this before I go forward. And then I've also done, in a case like that, if I knew that we could handle it and I let them go, I also know that there might be blowback from other employees who now have to work a little harder that week to make up for the person who's gone. And sometimes they come and they bitch and moan about it. And I was like, we got to just make sure we support them, because now they're going to support you if you ever have to take time off at the last minute. And
yeah.
But it is hard, right? Because you can't please everybody.
Well, and it's not your job to please everybody. I mean, you want to manage well, but the thing is like, I haven't had many jobs where I was necessarily a manager with full-time employees underneath me, but as a director of plays, and also as a producer of video where I'll have a crew working underneath me for a short period of time, I'm very, very used to having to manage a small group of people that comes together to put on a thing and then to leave. And so that's kind of where my management experience comes from. And one of the biggest mistakes I used to make was trying to please everybody. I really wanted to please everybody when I was directing Mr. Burns. Let's put it this way. I didn't please everybody. I most of them were very happy with me. One or two weren't. And I did what I could, what I thought I could, to try to make them happy. And I couldn't. And I realized, and I put a ton of stress on myself about pleasing them and making them happy. And it just never worked. And I thought, but it took finishing that and getting some perspective to go, well, it wasn't actually my job to please them. It was my job to direct and do the best that I could. But some people just cannot be pleased. Some employees cannot be pleased. Definitely a lot of bosses will never be pleased.
Oh, 100%. And even when you think that you've done something and say like, listen, hey, I've done something that's going to make everything better and it's going to be great for us, somehow they find something to complain about, right?
Right.
I've also noticed that, like, I've also worked for people who are incredibly insecure when it comes to their ego.
That's the worst. That is the absolute worst.
And like where they feel like they're being threatened because of ideas from people who are quote unquote underneath them. And so I find that there's a lot of trouble when you get someone who has power and wields power only to try and keep people where they're at or below.
Yeah.
And that sucks too, right? Nobody wants that. It'd be like if the pilot walked out every time that a plane took off and said, all right, everybody, strip naked. I'm the pilot. I want to know that you're all back here buck naked while I'm flying this giant metal bird through the sky.
I'm trying to figure out how that applies.
Yeah, I use that analogy for almost everything. So it's like, oh, you don't like hot sauce? Well, it's eating hot sauce on your eggs is like a pilot coming out telling you to strip naked. And mainly it's because on 2 flights to Disney World, I was forced to strip naked. But that's besides that's a story. Yeah,
maybe you got to stop going to Disney World.
Well, the problem is that like this was a Disney themed flight, and so I thought I would be better, but apparently I would not. I also want to throw something out real quick that has nothing to do with anything we've talked about here, but I think it's worth discussing, which is my thought on the Flash movie that came out.
I haven't seen it yet.
Right. And this is not spoiler. This is purely about the star of the movie, Ezra Miller.
Okay.
Who, as we've learned, is not a great human being when it comes to human rights.
Okay.
And I had to kind of wrestle with myself a little bit about whether or not I was going to go see this movie. And other people might have opinions, but this is what I'm going to throw out there. Ezra Miller is not the only person responsible for this movie to get made. There were PAs, there were assistant cinematographers, there were lighting designers, there was a catering company, there were people whose sole job was to build stuff, there were costume designers. There's a whole crew of people who had no ability to change the outcome of what's going on other than walking off that set and putting themselves in a personal dilemma. And I think as we start getting into a world where people start taking a risk on people who've been quote unquote canceled, at one point somebody's going to make a movie with Kevin Spacey again. And it's probably from the point of like, well, we could pay $50 million to get Tom Hanks, or we could pay $1 million and get Kevin Spacey, and there'll be a big enough audience who don't care about his misdeeds to go to it. Or maybe the court of public opinion will have fizzled out at that point and enough people who are just on the fence will go to it. This is one of those where I follow a couple people who are in this movie. One of them is a girl who was in the show Dairy Girls, and she posted about the Flash opening and how excited she was. And this is the first time that she's been in a major motion picture, certainly something as big as a superhero biopic. And it had 200 comments below it. And the majority of the comments were, I'm really sorry. I really support you. And I think you're great, but I can't go see this movie. I can't go support something that lines the pockets and introduces this person to more people. And in North Dakota, we've got an especially close tie to what's going on. And I'm really kind of rifling with this, and more so than anything else. For example, case in point, I watched Horrible Bosses the other day and I laughed my butt off the whole time. And Kevin Spacey's a major part of Horrible Bosses. I won't even deny that since the Bill Cosby issue, I've quoted Ghost Dad twice because I've been quoting it since I was 5 years old.
Right.
And I'm really trying to wrestle with those aspects. And I think it would be maybe a bigger deal if we didn't know that the DC extended universe was going to be canceled and then rebuilt from the ground up. So this is the only time he'll be in a Flash movie.
I don't believe that's the case. He's actually going to be, or they're actually going to be in more now. I believe that from what I've read on the internet. So obviously that doesn't actually mean much, but that this is the film that resets, and they are planning on Ezra Miller still being the Flash going forward. And Andy Muschietti, the director of The Flash, said so himself, that they're planning on making more with Ezra Miller, but also that Ezra Miller has made a number of mea culpas, including in front of the audience at the premiere, saying, thank you for sticking with me through my crap, and I'm working on myself. And it doesn't necessarily excuse anything, but there was an interview Lex Friedman did once with, I forget who he was interviewing, professor at a college or something. I can't remember who it was, but he was talking about, Jeffrey Epstein being at Harvard or something, and being sad that someone so evil could be allowed to walk the hallways of Harvard. And the professor said, well, he's the only one that you know about. Are you telling me that no evil students go there? Are you telling me that no evil administrators work there or no evil teachers have worked there? You have no control over who is and who is going out. If you go and support any institution, by and large, there is someone evil who is profiting off of it. And that really can't be on you. Otherwise, you can't do anything. You basically have to stay at home. I mean, if you go and buy McDonald's, someone evil is profiting off of that in some way. So I totally get the, hey, I'm not going to go and support this person as a stand. I have that myself from time to time, but at the same time, I don't necessarily hold myself to the standard of, am I a bad person for, listening to stand-up comedy from someone who did something really bad? I don't necessarily believe that I am, because the deeper you look, we all definitely have blood on our hands. And it's also kind of a judgment of, when is someone beyond the point of redemption? And who am I to say that they are? Some people are pretty obvious, Hitler, right? It can be pretty easy to make that distinction sometimes. So no, I get what you're saying. I do what I can, I guess, from my own part.
In the case of Ezra Miller, okay? So he has his apology at the premiere of the movie that could be $1 billion franchise for him, right? Pretty opportune. Maybe Hitler would have apologized if he was in front of a court at Nuremberg, and
right?
He was fighting for his life, and just
but Ezra Miller and Hitler are not comparable,
right?
Not even close.
I'm just saying. What I'm saying here is it seems to me like a weird opportunity that he used to apologize for some of his or not even apologize, like thanks for allowing me to work through these things. I haven't heard it yet specifically. I'm just going off of what you said, versus doing something else, like even saying like, listen, I'm willing to take a step back from promoting this movie, or like, I'm going to let the work stand on its own rather than having anything that is about me. Because even like if I'm at the premiere and I'm one of those other actors who are in it, who are thinking like, wouldn't it be great if I end up as a, like a character, like a Happy from the Iron Man series who keeps to go on, but this thing could all crumble based on the actions of this guy, I'd be a little perturbed and a little, I'd be like, I ended up hitched to the wrong horse. That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to help us continue to produce new episodes each week, visit jjmeetsworld.com, where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some swag at the merch shop, or follow our link to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all the sites the cool kids are using these days. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by visiting moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, check out linebenders.com, where you can find direct contact info for JJ or booking information. When I was cleaning up my office, one of the things I found was a gremlin puppet that I made from when I was a little kid. And I was not good at making puppets.